안녕하세요. 여러분의 한국어 선생님 고빌입니다. I'm from Los Angeles, California, and I am a Korean teacher. Really? In fact, I also realized that as of this summer, I've now been learning Korean for 17 years. I started back in 2005 while I was doing self-study and making some Korean friends in college. In fact, I have my very first Korean study book, which I bought right here. I do not recommend it though. But when you were trying to learn Korean back in 2005, you took what you could get. Then I ended up moving to Korea until the end of 2007 and continuing to study it while I was there. And then flash forward to 2012, seemingly out of nowhere, I made the decision to start this YouTube channel in order to help others to learn Korean. But why? Well, okay, before that, if this is your first time seeing me, make sure to click subscribe. And also please check out my channel for free videos, lessons, and even full courses about the Korean language and everything related to Korean. I upload new videos here every single week, and if you have a Korean question about anything, I probably already have a video about it right here. Okay, so in 2012, I started a YouTube channel. Random, right? Well, let's go back to before I was a Korean teacher. So before I had any books for sale or even this channel, no videos, back all the way to, right after I returned back to the US from Korea. So the very end of 2007. As soon as I got back from Korea, my first time, I remember really wanting to go back again, but not right away. Because plane tickets and everything are expensive, and I didn't even have my own car in the US. So I worked a few jobs. I worked at a Baskin-Robbins to save up enough money to buy my first car, and it was fun, and I got lots of free ice cream. If you're wondering, my favorite flavor is mint chocolate chip. Later, after that, I did get some other jobs that paid better, such as doing Korean telephone translation, but no free ice cream. So I'm working anyway and saving up money, and I have a lot of free time. In fact, now it's been a while since I was in Korea. I wasn't hanging out with my Korean friends anymore, and I slowly started losing that urge to go back to Korea and to continue studying Korean. In fact, I actually started learning Mandarin for a few months because I was dating a Chinese girl at the time. That didn't last long, the language as well as the girlfriend. After that, I even tried studying some Cantonese in 2011 in order to take a short trip to Hong Kong. And I was also getting back into my Japanese studies like I used to do before I learned Korean. And on top of all of that, I also took another French class, which I did all throughout high school. So there were lots of different languages that weren't Korean, and none of those I could speak well. So notice then, I'm not studying any Korean at this time. It was like that part of my life where I was studying only Korean and really interested in Korea had gone by, and I had moved on. And I remember not really regretting it either. I always just kind of considered myself someone who enjoys learning languages, but I didn't really see myself as attached to only one of them at the time. I knew more Korean than any other language that I'd studied up until that point, and I also enjoyed it the most, but there were still other languages that I really wanted to try learning. And without much money for traveling or any new Korean friends encouraging me, I kind of felt stuck. Even though I was actually using Korean for work almost every day to talk with customers, I didn't feel a need to improve it. So I'm just kind of like maintaining my Korean, not forgetting it, but not doing anything more with it. Until one of my really good friends introduced me to this little website called Reddit. And I realized there were a lot of people online, even way back in, this was 2011, trying hard to learn Korean. Not only Reddit though, but also I found dozens of other language groups on Facebook and even later on Google Plus. And although I wasn't 100% committed to Korean yet, I would still browse those communities out of boredom. And I was just curious. And every time I'd check these communities, I'd find the same Korean questions being asked over and over. Okay, nowadays, if someone asks a basic Korean question, anyone can just say, hey, here's a good lesson about it, and share a link. But this was back in 2011. So back then, back in my day, if you wanted a lesson about some grammar, you had to either go buy a book, or you took a class, or had a private tutor, or maybe you watched a YouTube video with a title something like How to Learn All of Korean in 2 Seconds with 009 Sound System's Dreamscape playing really loud in the background. Nowadays, everyone knows Talk to Me in Korean, but At the time, they were still pretty new with their first few levels. In fact, except for some Korean channels, like I remember Korean Class 101, nothing today existed back then. And the few that still are around, many of those channels have actually changed gears away from teaching Korean. So what I'm trying to say is the amount of free online content was severely lacking. So when I'd see those beginners asking the same questions over and over, the only option was to type out answers every single time and hope that other users were also typing the correct answers as well. What do you remember about learning Korean from 2011? If you were learning Korean then, please let me know in the comments. I'm curious to see what all of you can still remember. So I'd see the same basic questions posted online over and over. And sometimes often there would be different answers each time. Because as I said, there weren't even many resources to check in the first place. And there weren't a lot of people that could even help. So I started in those communities by answering questions and trying to help and get people back on track. And I did this almost every single day. It honestly gave me a reason to actually use my Korean outside of work. And I felt like I could really help. And I was getting to use my Korean, but it wasn't just a few questions. I actually noticed learners had a ton of questions about Korean in every online community. Most of those questions were basic, of course, but I saw a lot of incorrect answers going around from other users at the time. So I did what anyone else with a camcorder and a laptop with Windows Vista installed would do. And that is, I started a YouTube channel. In fact, my very first videos were made specifically to answer some of those most common questions that I saw people asking. And at the time, these were things like how to say want to or have to or the verb to be, as well as conjugating the you form. Now, these are all still fairly common questions that I hear, but nowadays there are dozens of videos or websites about any of these topics. At the time though, not so much. So that's how I got away with filming on a camcorder with a $20 microphone. There weren't that many other channels even out there in the first place. Now, I made the videos half to answer questions and half because I was just bored and having fun making videos. But right away, I started to notice I was getting hundreds of subscribers. And between the comments I'd get on my channel here and the replies that I'd get on my comments in other online communities, I realized there were really a ton of people out there who needed the type of help that I was offering. And right away, I felt a strong attachment to Korean again, one that I hadn't felt since I was actually living there. It was like I could feel that I could finally see the value of this language that I was just carrying around with me. And I knew that if people wanted my channel to stick around, if they wanted my help, then that this is what I wanted to do. I want to be a Korean teacher. I want to help more people to learn Korean. And it didn't take long before I had my camera back out and I was filming the next episode. And since then, I haven't missed a single week uploading a new video ever since I started. In fact, when I started, I had no idea how to do this. I didn't even know how to make videos or how to make them efficiently. And it would sometimes take me around 3 to 4 days just to make one single video, one of those earlier ones. It would be a day to write it, a day to film it, a day for narration and then editing. And I was literally just posting each video the day after I had finished it. So that's the story of why I started my YouTube channel. Now I want to talk about something else, and that is me being a teacher. So I call myself a Korean teacher despite not having any sort of special training to teach Korean. Everything I know about Korean, I learned through helping people in those online communities. And that doesn't mean I haven't studied on my own how to teach. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, but I didn't take like a class in order to become a teacher. And it's the same way actually that I learned how to film and edit these videos, simply by filming and editing these videos. So everything was kind of touch and go, and I knew a lot of general things about Korean that I could help people with. But I also realized really early on that if I wanted to make this YouTube channel last a long time, not just uploading videos, but if I really wanted to become a resource for helping more people, then I knew that I would have to learn way more. And I don't just mean learning more Korean, but I meant that I would have to learn more about how to teach Korean. For example, any native speaker out there, any native Korean speaker knows Korean, of course, but that doesn't mean that they can teach it to someone. So I found myself slowly collecting resources for teaching Korean. So websites that could back up what I was teaching. I bought several books. I found dozens of useful websites and reference materials online. And actually my favorite resource of all of them ended up being a free one, Naver Dictionary. And that's just an online dictionary. In fact, I'm going to be making a video really soon about Naver Dictionary and how to use it. So stay tuned for that. So I realized right away that I needed to learn how to teach these Korean concepts that I had learned. But not only that, but I also wanted to be able to teach them better than the resources that I had used to first learn those. Because as I mentioned, I learned mainly through just self-study and using books that were written sometimes in a confusing way. So while I was making lessons, I was also researching those topics in detail myself to see if I could improve my lessons about them. And then later, by the time that I was writing my book series, so Korean Made Simple, I had even clearer and better ways to explain those same concepts than I first did back when I was helping people learn Korean by writing comments on online communities. So if you're wondering then how I trained to become a teacher, well, I just learned it by teaching. Again, I knew the concepts fairly well as I already spoke Korean fairly fluently when I started this channel, and I could explain those concepts basically, but through practicing explaining them and through also doing further research, I became better able to explain those same concepts to other people. Because just knowing a concept in Korean is only half of being able to teach it. And if you actually go back and watch some of my first videos on this channel in my Learn Korean series, you'll notice that in a lot of those videos, I'm actually teaching very quickly and I'm condensing information way more than I do now. And that was just because I was still learning how to be an actual Korean teacher. I knew the concepts because I had studied them, but I didn't know the best way to share those with others. So if anyone out there already knows Korean and maybe you're already fluent or maybe you're a native speaker, and if you want to start teaching Korean on YouTube or maybe start your own website or do tutoring or whatever, I suggest starting out with teaching what you're most comfortable with and making as much helpful content about that as possible. So for me, I was most comfortable with teaching grammar, and that's what I also focused on in the beginning, like the only thing I focused on. Later, I expanded and started teaching other things like sometimes culture or dialects, etc. But in the beginning, if you watch my earlier videos, you'll see they're only about grammar because that's all that I felt comfortable teaching. Now, there's something that I need to say so nobody gets the wrong idea. I'm not a native Korean speaker, obviously. So by that, I mean I'm not perfect. My Korean's not perfect. I have made mistakes. I still make mistakes. And I'll continue to make mistakes. In fact, I've had a few times where I've uploaded a video and then realized afterwards that I messed up somewhere, so I had to re-edit and upload the video again later. It's not common, but it has happened, and it's kind of unavoidable because no matter how much Korean I learn or anyone learns, perfect is simply not a reachable goal for anyone. And believe it or not, native Korean speakers make Korean mistakes too, all the time, just as often as English speakers make mistakes. As a teacher, however, I really try extra hard not to make mistakes. I do proofread all of my lessons. I watch my videos multiple times before posting them, but sometimes mistakes can still slip through. For example, before I made the most popular video on my channel, which is Learn Hangul in 90 minutes, I once had a different Learn Hangul audio-only series that was on my old website design, and it was okay, but it didn't really give any information you couldn't find in other resources, even at the time. So I remade the whole thing, and I spent a ton of time researching every lesson before I released it, and the end results speak for itself. However, I wasn't satisfied with that. There were still some things that I wanted to improve. So later, using that video as a starting point, I actually rewrote the entire series, so teaching the alphabet again, and polished it. And that's what you can see if you watch my beginner Korean course today. So I just want to say I'm always learning new things about Korean. I'm always trying to improve. And I hope that I can keep doing this to keep teaching Korean forever. So in summary, through helping others learn Korean, I found something that I was not only good at, but also that I really enjoyed doing, which is making Korean lessons and these videos and books, and just being able to motivate other people to start their own Korean language journey. And that's why I decided I really wanted to be a Korean teacher. Okay, so that answers the question, but this video is not finished yet. I wanted to take a moment to just talk about what I do as a Korean teacher and go over my daily schedule. So if you weren't aware, all of this is my full-time job. It's just me. In case you were wondering, I'm not a company. It's just myself. Now, my schedule changes every day. It depends on exactly what projects I'm doing, but generally a day goes something like this. I'll wake up around 7 or 8 in the morning, I get dressed, and I start whatever I'm working on. For example, today I'm setting up equipment to film this video that you're watching, something as simple as this. This setup can take sometimes around 4 to 5 hours to set up, and this is all a set. I don't own a studio. This is the exact same room that I do my video editing. My computer's right over there, as well as the same room I do my live streams. I have to set everything up and take it down the same day, or there's not going to be any room at all to work in here. So if I were to ever get a raise somehow, the first thing that I'd probably do is rent my own larger studio. Now, I do make enough money to pay the rent by doing this, and it's enough to fly to Korea to film videos occasionally, but beyond that, there's no fancy car, there's no big mansion, I can't even hire any staff, I don't have a video editor, and if you're wondering exactly how much money someone like me makes teaching Korean, I can say, first of all, it really varies in my situation because I don't teach in a university or offer, paid classes. And I know that if you're a regular school teacher, you'd get paid a salary as well as benefits. And for me, the amount I make fluctuates every month. So I get paid money through YouTube for the short advertisements that appear on these videos. And every month that amount changes. So most of the time it's around $1,500 a month. And I once had it go as high as $2,500, but that was just for a couple of months. And that's because the content that I make here is educational. So I make a different amount than, say, a comedy YouTube channel or a lifestyle channel, etc. But when you also add in my Patreon supporters, and I'll put a link in the description, as well as my YouTube members here, and then all of my book sales, which can be another few $1,000s a month, actually, depending on the month. It is an incentive for me to keep doing this. It does pay my basic expenses in order to make this channel and keep making new videos. And I've even been able to buy some decent equipment in order to make these videos. So if you've watched my channel from a long time ago, you've probably noticed that things here today look a lot nicer than they used to. And that's really thanks to viewers watching my videos and supporting me. Because I can say that I want to teach Korean all day, but unless I can also keep the lights on, well, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's watching my channel out there. Now let's talk for a second about how I make my videos. So filming a short video like this can be as fast as an hour or two, including video tests, getting dressed and everything. Some of my larger videos though, like my episodes about Korean dialects or history, those can sometimes take a full week of filming. For today, after I film this video, I'm going to have to take down this whole set, transfer the files from the camera to my computer, and then if I'm lucky, I'll be able to get the project and everything set up so that I can start editing tomorrow morning when I wake up. If I'm not filming, then instead I'll usually be writing a video or planning a video or writing a lesson. I also spend up to an hour a day just replying to emails or comments that I get. So when you message me anywhere, it's really me replying. Again, this is just me. I don't have an assistant, and I'll typically work, like I said, from around 7 or 8 until around 7 or 8 p.m. on most days, sometimes later, but only if there's like a big project. And this has just been 7 days a week, every day, except for the most important days, like maybe my wedding anniversary or birthdays. But I'm not complaining, it's great, and I love what I get to do for my job. And again, I hope that I can keep doing it forever. So I hope that all of this, my rambling, has given you a good look into myself and why I decided to teach Korean. So what do you think? Are any of you out there considering becoming a Korean teacher, or are you already? Let me know in the comments. Also, if you like this video and would like to see more like this, please give this video a like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I will see you again in the next video. 그럼 다음에 또 봐.